They told us slavery ended in 1865, that Jim Crow was buried in the 60s, that we were free, equal, finally, American. But what if I told you they lied, that the chains just changed shape, that the whips became laws, and the cotton fields became prisons, that the same system that once auctioned our ancestors now cages our sons, denies our votes, and kills us in broad daylight, with cameras rolling? This is an ancient history. This is right now. This is Jim Crow in a three-piece suit, polished, legal, deadly. And the worst part? They don't teach this in school. They don't air this on prime time. They hope you never learn what was stolen, or how it still shapes every breath we take.
People that lived during Jim Crow, some of them still walk amongst us. And quite frankly, in this country, we don't like talking about race relations, and racism. We like happy history that we can celebrate in parades and smug conversations. But when we talk about Jim Crow, and we're talking about the horrors of Jim Crow, that makes us uncomfortable.
Between the late 1800s and the 1960s, America wasn't just segregated. It was engineered to crush black dignity, stifle black power, and erase black dreams, legally. This is a story of how a nation replaced whips with courtrooms, cotton fields with prisons, and human souls with dollar signs. This is the part they never wanted you to hear. In 1896, a man named Homer Plessy bought a first-class train ticket in Louisiana. He was black, but light-skinned enough to pass. He sat in the whites-only car. When he refused to move, they dragged him off the train and put him on trial. His crime? Sitting where whiteness said he didn't belong. The case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And instead of striking down segregation, the court signed off on it, calling it separate but equal. That ruling didn't just draw a color line. It drew a caste system into the American legal fabric. One that said, you stay down there and you stay quiet. But let's be clear, it was never equal. Not even for a second. White schools had heat. Black schools had broken windows and tar paper walls. White hospitals had emergency services. Black hospitals had death. Even truth itself was segregated. Judges in Atlanta kept two Bibles in court, one for white witnesses and one for black, because apparently even God had to obey Jim Crow. In North Carolina, black and white students weren't just taught separately. They were forced to use different sets of textbooks. Florida banned even storing black and white books in the same building. Yes, books. In Birmingham, Alabama, it was illegal for black and white people to play dominoes together. Dominoes. And if a black child wanted to read, learn, or dream, he'd better do it quietly, quickly, and without looking a white teacher in the eye. Because black education wasn't just underfunded. It was under attack. In Prince Edward County, Virginia, when the Supreme Court ordered schools to integrate in 1954, white officials closed every single public school in the county, not just for a week, not for a semester, for 5 straight years. Thousands of black children were left without teachers, books, or even classrooms. No apologies, no compensation, just silence. Imagine being 10 years old in 1959 and not return to school until 1964, if at all. After slavery, black men had the right to vote, on paper. But the white South had a trick up its sleeve, voter suppression, before the term even existed. Poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, and open terror made sure ballots stayed white. If you were black, they made you pay a tax just to cast a vote. Couldn't afford it? You were erased. They made you recite constitutional law from memory. Got it right? Too bad. They changed the rules. One trick read. If you've ever been convicted of a crime, any crime, you can't vote. Guess who the system loved to convict? In 1896, Louisiana had 130,000 registered black voters. By 1904, just 1,342, a 99% drop. That wasn't voter suppression. That was voter extermination. The courtroom was supposed to be the temple of fairness. But in Jim Crow America, it was a slaughterhouse with clean floors. Black people didn't get trials. They got performances. if a black man was accused of a crime. Even without evidence, the case was over before it began. All it took was one white finger pointed in rage, and a jury of white men would decide whether you die quickly or slowly. And if a black man dared to testify in his own defense, he had to swear on a different Bible, because his truth was deemed less sacred. The message was clear. Your skin makes you a liar. Your words mean less. Your life counts for nothing. This was the legal America, the one hidden behind patriotic speeches and dusty textbooks, the one that didn't just survive in the South. It thrived in plain sight. Courtrooms, school boards, city halls, even Congress looked the other way, because Jim Crow wasn't just a set of racist laws. It was a well-oiled machine, built to destroy every black dream before it could take its first breath. From convict leasing, where prison became a business built on black pain, to the Red Summer of 1919, when black pride came home from war and white mobs lit the streets on fire. It's not just history, it's the blueprint. And until we confront it, we'll keep living inside it. They said slavery was over, but it wasn't gone, it had just evolved. It swapped whips for paperwork. And the plantation? It moved behind bars. Because Jim Crow didn't just separate water fountains. It rebuilt slavery from the inside out, this time using the law as its master's whip. And the system that emerged would become America's most profitable horror story. After the Civil War, the South's economy collapsed. No free labor, no cotton profits, no empire. So they got clever. They passed laws that made it nearly impossible to be black and free at the same time. If a black man was unemployed, that was vagrancy. Jail. Couldn't prove your job on the spot? Loitering. Jail. Spoke too loud to a white man? Disorderly conduct. Jail. Once inside, the state leased your labor to private companies. Railroads. Mines. Steel mills. Farms. No pay. No safety. No freedom. Just chains. You were a slave again, but this time with paperwork. In Alabama alone, nearly 75% of all state revenue in the 1890s came from convict leasing. That's right, prisoners with economy. One eyewitness described men with their backs split open from daily beatings. Another recalled boys no older than 13 worked to death in coal mines, buried where they fell. And if you died in custody, the system just grabbed another body off the street. But even through all this, black people fought back. After World War I, black soldiers returned home, men who had risked their lives for freedom. But instead of welcome parades, they got lynch mobs. In the summer of 1919, white rage exploded across more than 25 cities in what's now called the Red Summer. In Chicago, a black teen named Eugene Williams was swimming in Lake Michigan when he accidentally drifted into the white section. A mob onshore hurled rocks until Eugene sank. Police refused to arrest the killers. Black neighborhoods exploded in grief and rage. Violence swept through Washington, D.C., Knoxville, Omaha, and beyond. In Elaine, Arkansas, black sharecroppers dared to organize for better pay. White mobs and the National Guard slaughtered hundreds, some say over 200, black men, women, and children. Survivors were tortured into confessing to crimes they never committed. 12 black men were sentenced to death. Their crime? Demanding justice. Even outside the South, Jim Crow found a home. In Illinois, Indiana, California, Oregon, it wore no hood, but it enforced the same hate. They called them sundown towns, places where signs at city limits warned black people to leave before dark. Don't let the sun set on you here. These weren't empty threats. Black travelers were dragged from cars, beaten, lynched, or simply vanished. Entire counties had 0 black residents, not because of coincidence, but because of generational cleansing. Police didn't protect you. They were the enforcers. Mayors signed off. Communities looked the other way. To this day, some of those towns still exist. Their names changed, but their silence remains. While the law destroyed black lives, the media destroyed black truth. In 1915, a film called The Birth of a Nation premiered. It depicted the Ku Klux Klan as heroes, saviors of white womanhood from dangerous black men. President Woodrow Wilson screened at the White House, calling it history written in lightning. And lightning struck. After the film, the Klan exploded in size. From a few thousand to over 4 million, black men were demonized as predators. Black women were erased. Black families were humiliated. This wasn't just entertainment. It was propaganda. And it rewired America's soul. Even newspapers played along, referred to lynchings as mob justice, black victims as troublemakers, and killers as concerned citizens. When 14-year-old Emmett Till was murdered in 1955 for allegedly whistling at a white woman, the local paper blamed him for violating customs. It was always the same script. The black body as a threat, the white hand as righteous, the truth as optional. Faced with unrelenting terror, over 6 million black Americans fled the South between 1910 and 1970. It was the largest internal migration in U.S. history. Families packed up in silence, leaving behind everything they knew for a chance at survival. Cities like Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles became new homes. But Jim Crow wasn't just a Southern ghost. He had cousins up north, redlining, job discrimination, police brutality. Housing policies created ghettos. Banks denied loans. Police patrol with a wartime mindset. Black folks escaped the noose only to find the financial whip waiting. By now, you're starting to see the pattern. Jim Crow wasn't a Southern mistake. It was an American strategy, a carefully designed system that evolved each time it was challenged. From convict leasing, to lynch law, to the lies of the media and myths of the courtroom, Jim Crow never truly left. He just changed clothes. We'll uncover the unfiltered truth behind lynchings, how entire towns gathered for spectacle murders, why the federal government refused to intervene, and the terrifying reason lynching photos were turned into postcards. Because America didn't just allow the violence. It celebrated it. They called it justice. But it was terrorism. They called it order. But it was chaos wrapped in a white robe. And what they did to black bodies wasn't hidden. It was framed, photographed, and mailed like a souvenir from hell. Because lynching wasn't just a punishment. It was a ritual, a warning, a celebration, and a business. This is the part of American history they desperately try to bury. But we're here to dig it up. From the 1880s to the 1960s, over 4,000 black men, women, and children were lynched in the United States. But lynching wasn't just murder. It was theater. Flyers were distributed ahead of time. Crowds arrived in Sunday best. Children were excused from school. Vendors sold snacks. Photographers stood ready. Entire towns gathered to watch a human being burned alive, shot, mutilated, or hung, often for crimes they never committed. A man accused of stealing a pig could be dragged from his cell, tortured for hours, and left hanging from a tree, his remains guarded by smiling white mobs. Sometimes their fingers were chopped off and sold. Other times their teeth, even their genitals. Then came the photos, turned into postcards, mailed across the country. This is what we do to troublemakers. It wasn't just violence. It was branding. You might ask, where was the government? They knew, they watched, and they chose silence. Ida B. Wells, a fearless journalist and abolitionist, exposed the truth in her writings. Lynching is color-line murder. It is the nation's disgrace. She traveled the country gathering names, dates, and stories of the dead at risk of her own life. And she wasn't alone. Over 200 anti-lynching bills were introduced in Congress. None passed. Southern politicians blocked them. Northern ones stayed quiet. Presidents dodged the issue. Even Franklin D. Roosevelt, praised for progressivism, refused to back anti-lynching legislation, afraid of losing Southern votes. It wasn't just neglect. It was complicity. History often centers the black male victim. But black women were also hunted and often erased. Mary Turner was 8 months pregnant when her husband was lynched in Georgia in 1918. She dared to speak out, demanding justice. For that, they hung her upside down, set her on fire, and cut the baby from her womb. They crushed the infant beneath their heels, then riddled Mary's body with bullets. She was 21 years old. Her death was a warning to every black woman. Stay silent. Know your place. Even young black girls were not spared. Some were raped, others beaten, many disappeared. All under the shadow of lawlessness and white impunity. But black people didn't just suffer, they fought back. In 1946, Maceo Snipes, a World War II veteran, became the first black man to vote in Taylor County, Georgia. The next day, he was shot on his porch by white supremacists. He bled for 6 hours because the local hospital didn't have black blood. He died that night, but he wasn't forgotten. That story lit a fire in the heart of Martin Luther King Jr. Then a teenager, he would later write, "The lynching of Snipes proved to me that America's soul was sick." Others took up arms. Robert F. Williams organized armed black defense groups in North Carolina. The Deacons for Defense and Justice protected civil rights workers from white violence. Fannie Lou Hamer stood in front of TV cameras, demanding the world see the bruises on her body, beaten simply for trying to register to vote. Each act of resistance was a strike against the myth of black helplessness. Too often, we're told the North was the good side, but the North turned its back too. When black families fled to Chicago or Detroit to escape lynchings, they faced housing covenants, police brutality, and violent mobs who torched homes and bombed neighborhoods. In Cicero, Illinois, in 1951, a black family moved into an apartment. A white mob of 4,000 people stormed the building, breaking windows, throwing furniture into the streets, and setting fires. Police didn't stop them. Not a single person was convicted. This wasn't the South. This was America. All of it. America had an uncanny obsession, turning black pain into entertainment. Photos of lynched bodies were sold. Songs were written about killings. Even plays dramatized the murder of black men as necessary for order. And the worst part? The nation never apologized. No reparations. No national memorials until the Equal Justice Initiative's memorial opened in 2018. Over 100 years too late. Even today, textbooks skim over lynching. Hollywood rarely dares touch it. Politicians speak vaguely of mistakes, but never call it what it was. State-sanctioned genocide. The ropes may be gone. The postcards faded. But the trauma lives on, etched in the black American soul. Lynching wasn't a relic. It was a message, a campaign, a ritual to keep black people afraid. But fear never broke us. It forged us. We enter the modern era, where the Jim Crow playbook has been rebranded, where prisons, policies, and police replaced nooses and chains, and where the war on black existence didn't end. It just put on a badge. The whips are gone. The nooses? Hidden. But the system? It never left. It just evolved, changed its name, swapped robes for suits, traded lynch mobs for law enforcement. They told us slavery ended, that Jim Crow was buried, that civil rights were won. But the truth? America just rebranded black oppression and called it justice. By the late 1960s, Jim Crow was officially over. But instead of repentance, white America got strategic. Richard Nixon's presidential campaign rolled out what they called the Southern Strategy. The idea? Win over white voters in the South by tapping into their racial resentment, without saying the quiet part out loud. So they swapped segregation for states' rights. They traded Negro crime for law and order. And just like that, the dog whistles became policy. Lee Atwater, a Republican strategist, later admitted, you start out in 1954 saying, NR, and asterisk, asterisk, R. By 1968, you can't say that it hurts you. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. They weren't hiding. They were marketing racism smarter. Then came the war on drugs. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan launched a crackdown on drugs that hit black communities like a wrecking ball. Crack cocaine flooded inner cities. Brought in through back channels many believe were linked to covert government operations. But instead of treatment, black addicts got prison time. Instead of investment, black neighborhoods got militarized policing. Instead of compassion, they got handcuffs and headlines. Black men, some barely 18, were sentenced to decades for possession. Meanwhile, white suburban users were sent to rehab. The result? From 1980 to 2000, the U.S. prison population exploded, and to face it was overwhelmingly black. Mass incarceration became the new plantation. Let's get real. Modern policing didn't come from some noble place. It evolved directly from slave patrols. In the South, armed white men formed patrols to chase down enslaved people who tried to escape. Their job? To capture, beat, or kill. After emancipation, those patrols became police departments, tasked with enforcing black codes and quelling black resistance. Fast forward to today. Unarmed black people are still being shot. Traffic stops still turn fatal. And somehow, the system always finds a way to justify it. Eric Garner said, "I can't breathe." George Floyd said, "I can't breathe." But America, it kept breathing just fine. Jim Crow was never just about signs on water fountains. It was economic sabotage. In northern and southern cities alike, black families were denied mortgages under federal policy known as redlining. Banks drew red lines around black neighborhoods and labeled them high risk, making it nearly impossible to buy homes. No home ownership meant no wealth building, no equity to pass on. Then came urban renewal, aka Negro removal. Entire black communities, like Paradise Valley in Detroit or Seneca Village in New York, were demolished for highways, parks, or progress. The land was taken, the people were pushed out, and the wealth vanished. Today, the average white family's net worth is 10 times that of the average black family. That's not by accident. That's design, voter suppression, police brutality, racial profiling, environmental racism, school segregation returning under new names. It's Jim Crow wearing a suit and tie. Felony disenfranchisement laws mean 1 in 13 black Americans can't vote, many for nonviolent offenses. In states like Georgia and Texas, voter ID laws and polling place closures disproportionately target black voters. And in education, predominantly black schools receive $23 billion less in funding than white schools annually. This isn't coincidence. It's not oversight. It's a continuation of a system that's always known exactly what it was doing. They gave us Obama and told us racism was over. But for every black president, there were 1,000 black deaths at the hands of the system. Trayvon Martin was 17. Sandra Bland never made a home. Tamir Rice was 12. And the killers, more often than not, walked free, were told to move on, that we're too angry, that slavery was so long ago. But trauma doesn't vanish. It gets passed down, in blood, in memory, in the way we walk, talk, and teach our children how to survive. Still, we rise, because despite centuries of terror, black people have produced genius, art, resistance, and joy that changed the world. We survived chains. We survived fire. We survived America's attempt to erase us. And now, we tell the stories they tried to bury. We build platforms. We demand truth. We refuse silence. Because the only way to dismantle the system is to first see it for what it really is. Not ancient, not distant, but now, here, still breathing. But not for long. Not as long as we keep breathing louder. If this story moved you, don't just watch. Share it. Talk about it. Teach it. Because silence is a soil in which injustice grows. And we were never meant to be silent.